Sometimes life finds us in our most vulnerable moments, without warning, as if an invisible hand quietly turns the page of fate. And one of those pages holds a test written just for us. Sometimes that test is silence, sometimes it's darkness, and sometimes a being that doesn't need words changes the entire story. In the heart of Arizona, among winds that stretch endlessly across the desert, small footsteps moved quietly into the night. A pair of pajama pants glimmering under the moonlight. And behind them, a gaze, unseen but deeply felt. This is the story of 2-year-old Boden, the moment a normal day turned into an extraordinary night when he suddenly vanished. Rocky canyons, sharp cliffs, thorny brush, and an eerie stillness. And in that silence, a child's fading breath. The sky that night held no stars. The moon stood alone. The trees didn't whisper, but they were watching. Everything seemed to hold its breath. But in the middle of that darkness, there was a child, and a heart that believed it was alone. Because in that darkness, another pair of eyes were open, silent, strong, and wide awake. Buford. He wasn't just a dog, he was a companion, a tracker, a guardian, and on that night, he was a miracle. This is not just the story of a missing child, it is a tale of loyalty in its purest form, of instinct deeper than words, of invisible bonds that reveal themselves on the thin line between life and death, because some heroes don't speak. Some simply look and move when the moment is right, with wordless, unwavering resolve. So now, let's step into that night, and together find the light hidden in the dark. The stillness of the night was broken by a faint hum. Soft, almost too soft to notice. But slowly it grew louder, turning into the unmistakable sound of helicopters. The thrum of rotors spread over the forest. Birds stirred, leaves trembled. Light beams flickered through the trees. Thermal cameras and radar systems scanned the darkness. 4x4 headlights tried to pierce through. Everything had been mobilized to find one child. 2-year-old Boden Allen. Search teams formed a wide perimeter. People from nearby towns and farms joined in, tired, worried, but hopeful. Helicopter cameras, night vision lenses, heat scanners. But nature is unpredictable. Temperature shifts and wildlife confused the devices. Deer, squirrels, even mountain lions registered as possible targets. Nothing gave certainty. Nearby, search crews picked up traces of danger, fresh paw prints, heat signatures, and eerie silence in zones known for predators. Mountain lions were out there, watching, waiting. The area flagged for possible threat was just a few hundred yards from where Boden had last been seen. And in the shadows, something else moved, unseen by any camera but deeply aware. Meanwhile, Boden was still walking. Tiny feet fought the dry earth, thorns and twigs. His pajamas were torn, knees scraped, hands dusty, eyes tired, mind confused. He didn't know where he was going, only that his mother's voice was gone. Maybe he thought it was a game, but step by step, the game turned into fear. Eventually, he crouched beside a rock and rested his head. He didn't want to sleep. It felt like disappearing. No cars, no voices, just wind, and the cry of an owl echoing like a ghost. He whispered, "Mommy, I come," but his voice only reached dust and leaves. Quiet sobs followed. He wiped his nose with dirty hands. Then he imagined a small campfire made of stones and a pine cone. In his mind, his family gathered, his mother baking, his siblings laughing, his father smiling. For a moment, he smiled. Then, a shimmer through the trees. A woman in white. She knelt and whispered, "I'm here, sweetheart." He reached out, but she vanished. Moonlight returned to normal. The leaves stilled, and he understood. He was alone. He curled beneath a tree. Then, a twig snapped. Eyes opened wide, heart pounded. He shrank into himself, trying to stay awake, but exhaustion won. He dreamed of home, of warmth, of his blanket. Moonlight crossed his skin like a soft thread, but he no longer noticed. Miles away, heavy, steady steps moved through the dark. They didn't crush branches. They glided, silent, alert. These weren't the steps of danger. They were the sign of something else. A miracle was approaching. Within a few hundred yards, glowing yellow eyes moved through the dark. A mountain lion, too close to Boden's trail. In the early hours of the night, hope had already begun to crack. And as time passed, it grew heavier, like a weight pressing down on every heartbeat. Inside the house, every second stretched into an eternity. Sarah paced the living room with trembling hands, checking her phone again and again. No new messages, no missed calls, just a glowing screen that offered nothing but silence. She had sent the same desperate text a dozen times, and each unanswered word pressed harder on her chest. The house was quiet, but not in peace. It was the kind of silence that shouted. Every corner reminded her of what wasn't there. In the kitchen, her eyes fell on a small chair by the table, Boden's. She reached out, tracing the edge as if it might vanish if she blinked. Then she opened a drawer. A folded pair of pajamas stared back at her, soft blue covered in stars. She held them to her face. They still smelled like that morning, but now it was just the scent of absence. She stepped down the hall and paused at the kids' room, cracked the door open. None of them were asleep. The oldest lay still, his fists clenched under the covers. The youngest gripped her stuffed bear, her little face blank. Sarah's throat ached. Her eyes were already swollen. Just before closing the door, she glanced at the family photo beside the bed. Boden laughing, arms stretched like wings. Flying, free. Now, those tiny hands were nowhere in sight. Meanwhile, Corey wasn't home. He had been out for hours with the search crews, a backpack on his shoulders, a flashlight in his grip, and a desperate kind of hope burning behind tired eyes. He hiked the rocky trails, crawled through thick brush, listened for any sound, any sign. Arizona's terrain scraped at his boots. Dust coated his lips. The night air bit into his bones. But he kept moving, because stopping felt like surrender, and he couldn't surrender. Just before dawn, he stepped back into the house. He turned off his flashlight. His boots creaked against the tile, but the air inside didn't move. Sarah was still on the couch, clutching Boden's tiny blanket to her chest, eyes open, staring. Corey stood in the doorway, then stepped forward. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Sarah turned to him. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, 1,000 silent sentences passed. Fatigue, guilt, fragility, hope. "He should be right here," she whispered, looking at the couch. Corey dropped to his knees beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. The world had collapsed into that one small room, and there were no words left to fix it. The radio buzzed faintly in the background. Coordinates, check-ins, voices and static. But inside that house was only a quiet kind of breaking. Sarah closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Corey walked to the window, stared into the dark, but his thoughts were far away. Where was Boden? Was he cold? Was he scared? Was he still alone? And somewhere, beyond what they could see, a tiny body curled in the dirt, drifting between sleep and survival. But through that silence, something had begun to move. Quiet, certain, and with a light in his eyes. No one knew his name yet, but by morning, the world would call him the Night Sentinel. Boden's tiny feet were numb. The gravel, thorny brush, dry earth, they'd all torn through the thin fabric of his pajamas. His knees were scraped, his hands cut and dusty. His eyes stared blankly, mind adrift. He didn't know where he was going, only that the lights of home were gone. His mother's voice, gone. Maybe at first it felt like a game. hide and seek, but now it was silence. Cold, aching silence. He stopped, bent at the knees, then crouched beside a large rock, resting his head on his arms. He didn't want to sleep, because sleep felt like vanishing. No voices, no cars, no name being called, just wind and a distant owl. He looked up at the moon. It stared back. Cold, far, not for him. He whispered, "Mommy, I'm coming." But it went nowhere, into dust, into nothing. Quiet tears rolled down his cheeks. He wiped his face with a dirty sleeve, then tried something else, pretending. He made a circle with small stones, a pine cone for a campfire. In his mind, pancakes cooked. His dad smiled. His siblings played. He smiled too, just for a moment. Then, a flicker of light, a figure through the leaves, a woman in white. She bent down, stroked his hair. "I'm here," she said. He reached, but his body didn't move. His head spun, and just like that, she was gone. It was only mist. The light faded, leaves stilled, and he understood. He was alone. He curled up under a tree. Then, a snap. His eyes flew open, heart pounding. He knocked over the pine cone, pressed against the trunk, covered his head, tried to stay awake. But fear, cold, and hunger were too much. He slumped forward. This wasn't just sleep. It was surrender. Still, a spark inside flickered. He thought of his mother, his blanket, the smell of their kitchen. Moonlight threaded through the trees. He didn't notice an owl passed above, silent. He didn't hear. His eyes were closed, far away. Heavy but graceful steps moved across the ground. Not breaking twigs, gliding, belonging. They weren't danger. They were something else, a miracle in motion. Closer now, another figure passed through the brush. Yellow eyes, a mountain lion. Thermal cameras caught its shape hours ago. Too close, but it never reached the child, because something else had arrived. Buford, the night sentinel. His pace slowed. The scent was stronger here. Small footprints in the dirt, uneven, dragging. A child, alone. Buford's instincts flared. But this was more than instinct now. It was purpose. Then, he stopped. The moon lit a small clearing, and there, under a tree, a child. Buford crept forward, lowered himself, listened. Boden stirred. Eyelashes fluttered. He saw him. Dark eyes, a giant shape. Still, safe. Buford sat, wrapped his body around the child. A silent wall. A guardian. Boden trembled, then reached out, touched warm fur. Real, and from that moment, Buford stayed. He watched, listened, protected. No animal came close. Maybe the mountain lion turned back. Maybe Buford's presence was enough. Boden's breathing slowed. He closed his eyes, not from fear, but from trust. And Buford, he didn't sleep. Not for a second, because some heroes don't speak. They just watch and protect. That night, Buford's footsteps were quiet, but full of purpose. The moon hung like a pale coin in the sky. The air was cool like a desert morning, dry, sharp, and still. The only sound was nature itself. Dry leaves rustling, wind whispering through bare trees, and scent trails riding the breeze straight to Buford's nose. He reached the edge of the farm and paused. Tilting his head, he sniffed the air without opening his eyes. Then he caught it. Not a fox, not a deer, not a goat. Something smaller, fresher, human, a child. Buford lowered his head. His muscles tightened, his pace shifted. Now he was a tracker, a sentinel. He didn't bark. He didn't panic. He moved, quiet as dusk, focused like a compass. He followed a path he'd never taken before. A trail unused by livestock or people. A place only the wild dared. But Buford didn't hesitate. He belonged here. The earth was dry, scattered with loose stones. Moonlight slipped through the leaves. At each mark, Buford paused, sniffed, studied, learned. Tiny footprints, uneven steps, brush pushed aside. A child had been here. But not anymore. Now, Buford was here too. He wasn't just tracking, he was guarding. Then, a sound, low, fragile. A faint whimper, maybe a whispered, "Mommy." Buford's ears lifted. He turned. The sound and the scent became his compass. He moved into the valley. Trees thickened. Shadows deepened. The slope steepened. But Buford didn't waver. Then, a clearing. Moonlight reached the ground, and there, a shape, small, curled, still. Boden, arms wrapped around his knees, head buried, covered in dust, shoeless, silent. His sleep wasn't peaceful. It was surrender. Buford froze, lowered himself to the earth, moved with the night. Not a sound, not a snapped twig. He stopped just feet away, his eyes locked on the child. Through tired lashes, Boden stirred. He opened his eyes, saw a shadow. Then, eyes. Not red, not threatening, just watching. Software, steady. Boden didn't cry. He blinked, studied, reached out and touched fur. Warm. That was enough. He relaxed, and for the first time all night, he felt safe. Buford laid down, curled himself around the boy, placed his head beside Boden's, but kept his eyes open, always watching. No predators came. Maybe Buford's presence was enough. Hours passed. The cold grew stronger, but Buford shielded Boden like a living blanket, like a wall made of loyalty. At last, light touched the eastern sky. The birds hadn't sung yet, but morning was near. Buford lifted his head. His ears twitched. Beside him, Boden stirred, opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Buford, massive, calm, there, and Boden smiled. Not because someone told him to, because he felt it. No words, just trust. He stood, wobbly, but ready, and then he followed. Tiny feet behind a silent hero, as if they'd always known the way home. As Scotty wrapped up his patrol, he walked toward the ranch gate. Morning was just beginning to break, a pale shade of blue sneaking through the last traces of night. Everything was still asleep, but that morning the world was about to wake up to a miracle. He shielded his eyes and squinted toward the horizon. That's when he saw it, a movement near the gate. He stopped, his heart skipped. Standing there was Buford, but this time he wasn't alone. Next to him stood a small child, covered in dust, clothes torn, barefoot and pale, but upright, awake, alive. Scotty took a step back, then slowly stepped forward, barely breathing. He dropped to his knees, voice trembling as he whispered, Are you Boden?" The little boy gave a tiny nod. He didn't speak, just looked up at Scotty. Then his gaze shifted, straight to Buford. Buford didn't move, didn't bark, didn't flinch. He just stood there, tall and still. No pride, no fear, just calm. Scotty gently reached out and touched Boden's shoulder. The boy's skin was warm, real, alive. He exhaled, voice barely a whisper as he reached for his radio. "This is Scotty. I think we found him." Within minutes, the ranch filled with first responders, paramedics, deputies, search teams, all swarming the front gate. They wrapped Boden in a blanket, cleaned the scrapes on his arms, placed a bottle of water in his tiny hands. But Boden couldn't take his eyes off Buford. The connection hadn't broken. It was still there, like an invisible tether. Then Sarah arrived. The car door flung open and she bolted toward the scene, but for her, time stood still. Her dress snagged on thorns. She didn't feel it. Her knees scraped against rocks. She didn't stop. Her eyes were full of tears, her heart about to burst. Boden turned as she approached. He didn't run, just stood there, frozen for a second, unsure if it was a dream. Then he dropped into her arms, and the floodgates opened. He cried, not the silent kind of cry, the kind that comes from somewhere deep inside, the kind only a mother can soothe. Sarah wrapped him up, melted the entire night's worth of fear in one embrace. Her tears soaked his hair, but they weren't tears of sorrow anymore. They were tears of thanks, of healing, of coming home. Corey stepped out of the car and collapsed to his knees. His legs just gave out. Then slowly, he rose again, walked forward and placed his hand on Boden's cheek. A scratch, some dust, but alive, warm, real. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The other children stayed in the car, holding each other. Jack, the eldest, cracked the window but didn't get out. He watched with misty eyes. His little sister pressed her toy bear against the glass, a soft smile trembling on her lips. Their family, in that moment, was whole again. A missing piece returned. And just behind them all stood Buford. Still silent, still steady. He didn't bark, didn't run toward the crowd, didn't ask for attention. He simply watched, as if he knew something had ended and something new was beginning. Scotty walked over, knelt beside him, and gently placed a hand on his massive head. His fingers were damp with tears. "You did this," he whispered. "You saved a life." Quietly, Buford's eyes showed no pride, just depth, as if carrying something ancient. And that's when Scotty remembered something. A dog found years ago, chained outside a collapsed shed, with a rusted collar and tired eyes. No one had known his full story, but now they all knew one thing. Buford didn't talk about the past. He protected the future. At 9:15 a.m., the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office posted a message on social media. Good news. 2-year-old Boden Allen was found early this morning, safe and sound. He was discovered at a ranch nearly 7 miles away, guarded by a dog. He has been reunited with his family and is in stable condition. Thank you to everyone involved in the search. The post went viral. Thousands of comments flooded in. People cried behind their screens, and most of them said the same thing. He's not just a dog, he's a hero. A local news station interviewed Scotty. His voice cracked as he looked into the camera. "I woke up this morning, and Buford was at the gate. But this time he wasn't alone. There was a kid standing beside him, and the way Buford looked at me, it said, 'Mission complete.' Buford didn't get a medal that day, but he gave the world something far greater. He gave a life back and etched his name into the hearts of millions. Because some heroes don't need words, they just need to show up at the right time with the right heart. That morning, a boy was saved, a family was whole, and the world remembered. Loyalty is quiet, but its impact is endless. Some stories aren't just watched, they're felt. They settle deep into the heart. Buford's story wasn't just a rescue, it was a reminder that silent heroes still walk among us, that invisible bonds exist between instinct and love, between danger and protection, between being lost and being found. And sometimes all it takes to save a life is simply being there. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a silent hero in your life? Maybe a pet, maybe a person, maybe just a moment you'll never forget. Share it with us, because your story could be someone else's hope. And if Buford's quiet courage moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Turn on the bell so you never miss another story. Because sometimes, a story isn't just told, it's carried, lived, remembered. And sometimes, a story truly can save a life. Never forget, real heroes don't speak. They just look, understand, and quietly, forever change your world.